Oh, sorry. I was just admiring my new sword. No, it's a sword. Oh, right. Mortals, of course. One thing I forgot to mention in the Changeling Chimera video is that changelings have the power, some of them, to craft Chimera. And it's a lot easier to do if you happen to have something that looks like your end product. So, in a pinch, it won't hold up forever, but in a pinch, a changeling can make a chimerical sword out of a butter knife. Of course, this chimerical sword would only affect creatures in the dreaming or other changelings, but regardless, with that little addition there, I thought it would be nice to go over finally how combat works in Changeling. I'm going to put that over there. First of all, there are three basic kinds of combat. You have firefight, which is all ranged weapons, not just firearms. You have melee, which is any weapon or thing that you're holding. Whereas brawl, the final category, is without any kind of weapon. And brawl doesn't mean just fists, of course. You can headbutt, kick people, whatever you'd like to flavor it as. Okay, so the first stage of combat in Changeling is initiative. All combatants roll their wits plus alertness against a difficulty of 4. The person with the most successes goes first, the person with the least successes go last, and if you botch your roll, you automatically go last. Something went wrong for you. Storytellers, if you have more than a few enemies, in fact, if you have more than 3 or 4, just roll 1 initiative for all of them and have them all act in that general same time. It saves so much time. Anyway, once initiative order is decided, we can move on to the attacking phase. But a quick note. The book assumes that the basic way to play is rolling initiative every round. That's tedious. The book points out it's tedious, and it recommends that if you don't want to do that, you roll 1 initiative at the start of combat like you might do in a traditional fantasy tabletop. That is how I play. It's such a time saver. Anyway, moving right along. Before your attack phase, you have to declare what you're going to do this round. Make sure that the storyteller knows what you're about to do before you do it. And he'll decide what rolls you have to make. So, basically, you attack. To attack with a firearm, or in your firefight, you roll dexterity plus archery or dexterity plus firearms, depending on what you're using. In a melee fight, you use dexterity plus melee, and in a brawl, you use dexterity plus brawl. Okay, so the difficulty of your roll is determined by your weapon. A knife has a difficulty 4, whereas a shotgun has a difficulty 6, and you can find more of those in the storytelling section. Next, we would normally go on to the resolution phase, but first, your opponent has the option to dodge. If you would like to dodge, simply declare to the storyteller that you'd like to attempt to dodge out of the way of the blow. And you will roll your dexterity plus your dodge against a difficulty of 6. In the case of a melee or brawl, anyway. Your dodge is going to be a difficulty of 6 plus 1 for each additional person you're trying to dodge. In a firefight, the difficulty of your dodge is determined by the cover that is nearby, which is, of course, something your storyteller should let you know. Next, we move on to the resolution phase. Anyone who got hit takes damage, and the way that works is the attacker rolls a number of dice determined by their weapon. So let's pretend for a minute that knives, say, have 2 damage dice. You roll twice against a difficulty of 6. Sorry, on a knife you would roll twice. You roll your number of damage dice against a difficulty of 6, and a, a firearm, specifically a firearm, you add the number of successes you scored in the previous round to your damage dice. Quick note here, the book does specifically say firearms, and specifically not melee or brawl, but it doesn't say anything about other ranged weapons. That's up to your storyteller. Personally, I rule that, an arrow isn't going to do more damage than a gun. And yes, I know that's not how it really works, but, Okay, so anyone who takes damage may now attempt a soak roll, which is just a stamina roll, just stamina, nothing else, against a difficulty of what else? 6. Each success that you roll damages out, cancels out a point of damage that you would have otherwise taken. If you get more health levels or damage than you have, you die. Yay! Okay, so I'm not going to run through an example. It's a very complicated setup. It will definitely take you a couple of times to get used to. But here are some other things you might want to keep in mind during combat. The first of which, complications. Anything that adds to the difficulty of your roll. In a firefight, this might be your opponent having cover, or in a brawl, it might be you trying to tackle, grapple, etc. your opponent. It's more difficult than a straight punch to the face. Okay. 2-weapon fighting means that you split up your dice pool, but you do get a bonus die to assign to one of those pools. Defending increases the difficulty of your opponent's attack. Crossbows take time to use. Mounted combat is really difficult. Armor adds to your soak roll. You can spend glamour to hit harder. There's literally no reason for them to have included duels in this chapter because they're not different than any other combat, but they do it anyway. Magic is powerful, but other changelings will of course know that you are attempting to cast a cantrip. Your bunk is going to be very obvious. And finally, there are 2 different kinds of damage. One affects your physical self and one affects your fairy self. They are not cumulative. They take damage separately, but if either one dies, you lose. If you die to chimerical damage, you can be brought back later, but not if your mortal body is dead or if you were killed with cold iron. And that's it for combat. Combat begins on page 236 in the rulebook and ends about page 248. After page 248, there are some helpful tables that can definitely assist with your game. If you don't want to constantly check the tables, I recommend picking up a Changeling storyteller screen. And finally, if this is all very complicated, and it is, trust me, there is a section starting on page 252 that's a comic book, and it explains how everything works, and it shows you in-game and out-of-game what's going on. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.